All right, welcome back to another edition of the Real Life Finance Podcast. I am your host, Ben Juergens, and I'm joined by none other today with Kathy Schoettlin, our Chief Communication, Culture, and Social Responsibility Officer. Kathy, thank you for... Yeah, it is, isn't it? But thanks for joining us today.
It's a pleasure to be here with you, Ben.
Well, good. Well, I've gotten to work with you for many years now at the bank, and I thought it'd be great to have you on to share about, communication is such a big, integral thing in today's world. So we want to dive into a little bit with Old National. But before we do that, I want you to kind of share your career path, because you're not traditionally a banker by trade.
No.
But we'd love to share the story of how you kind of came to Old National and your career path along the way.
So, Ben, yeah, it's interesting. So, I had the pleasure of attending the University of Southern Indiana. My major was communications with an emphasis in public relations. And, as I was approaching actually the final couple years, I had an opportunity to do an internship. And so I went to internship fair, and, at that point in time, I was like, oh, goodness, what in the world am I going to do with my life? And then I met an individual that was with the American Red Cross, and she had lots of personality. She had lots of passion, and I was immediately drawn to her, and vice versa. And so she encouraged me to come in, and let's just say that started my career with the American Red Cross.
Awesome.
And at that time, I really, I was at a place and time where I had this big desire of doing something that was impactful. I would say I also had a desire to, have an opportunity to serve others. And so I was big at that time with Big Brothers, Big Sisters, just absolutely thoroughly loved that, and actually was a big for 10 years.
I believe you were Big of the Year, right?
I had that honor. I have to tell you, probably my little did more for me than I did for him. He was quite amazing. And so, and also had really a point in time that I needed some self-worth. And so I was drawn to the Red Cross, and I started an internship there. Now, I'll never forget, I had been there for all of 2 weeks. They gave me this very big binder. Now it would probably be on a computer. And it said, can you read all of this information in the event that we have a disaster? We would want you to assist with being the public information officer. I had no idea what that meant. So I think I read 2 pages of the binder, and we had the C-130 plane crash.
Oh, that was at that time.
It was.
Wow.
Actually, the anniversary of that plane crash was just
Yeah,
last week,
that's
February
right.
6th.
I did see that.
It was February 6th, 1992. 16 individuals from our community were killed. And at that time, the individuals that perished, 2 of which I knew, one was actually a Red Cross volunteer, and the other one was an individual that attended Mater Dei, and he was a couple years ahead of me. So needless to say, we all kicked into action. And at that time, while it was absolutely devastating, it was an extremely sad point for our community, obviously for all affected. It was also a time where it was a little bit of a turning point for me, and I'm like, this is what I want to do. It was so there was so much involved in terms of self-fulfillment and the opportunity, whether it was giving a cup of coffee to someone who was serving as a police officer, or someone was volunteering. I helped with the crisis line and doing a lot of various other things at that time. But I knew that was my calling. And I think God really put me on that path. And so I was there for 14 years. And I did a little bit of everything, volunteer services, public relations. I had been there about 12 years, and I was asked to serve as the disaster director for the state of Indiana. But I did that through the Southwestern Indiana chapter, and also still did my public relations and things of that nature. And loved the job, loved fulfilling the mission, loved helping other people. But it kind of got to a point where I mentally and physically was absolutely exhausted. No such thing as a holiday. Didn't really matter.
They don't get the bank holidays like we do.
Nope, no bank holidays. I remember 4th of July, Easter, if there was any kind of disaster within the state of Indiana, I was called. And so, again, mentally, physically exhausted, but still very much, loved the job, loved kind of fulfilling the mission. And then I got a call from a headhunter from Old National Bank. And candidly, it was kind of humorous. I kind of thought it was a joke. And so I was like, do you know I don't even balance my checkbook? And they're like, no, we're interested in someone to come and serve as, either community relations or public relations officer. So just to say, long story short, I had the opportunity at that time to come in and meet with Bob Jones, who, of course, at that time was CEO. And it was a very brief conversation. I was very candid with him. I shared the fact that, I don't really love numbers. I don't balance my checkbook. And he
We can
said,
work on that with the real life finance.
I know. I've been meaning to get to you, Ben. But he said, that's not what I'm looking for. I want someone to wake up every day and worry about the communities that we serve. And I said, well, I already do that. And so anyway, then I took the leap. And I have to tell you, looking back, I'm like, wow, that was a leap. Going from nonprofit to for-profit and working for a bank. But I've never looked back. And the job is so very fulfilling. And truly, I had the opportunity not just to help and serve one mission of an organization, but an opportunity to work with so many amazing nonprofits. And, Old National Bank, our legacy is a community bank, and that's helping strengthen our communities throughout our footprint and impacting lives. And so I have the greatest benefit. I feel like I have the greatest job in the world because I get to work with people like you.
I tell you, it's a pleasure to work with you. And so coming from the nonprofit side into the banking, and you still get to have those great relationships. And I know you probably still have connections with the American Red Cross.
Oh, yeah.
And you think today of how many disasters we hear about going on. That is a ever-growing challenge of a job. I just can only imagine. So
I think the last year that I was with the organization, and I was also doing work for national headquarters and mitigation. And I think the last year I was there, we had 12 national disasters within the state of Indiana. So again, while very fulfilling, worked with amazing people. And my whole career journey, I have just worked with phenomenal people. So I'm very blessed that I had that opportunity. I'm obviously still very close to the organization. It's a wonderful cause. But yes, now I get to help and serve other organizations as well.
I love it. Well, we're proud and happy to have you here. I know we get to work closely a lot together. And, within your long title, a piece of that is corporate social responsibility. So I have a question. Can you define corporate social responsibility in your own words?
I think it's meeting community needs, helping those that are underserved, whether it be low to moderate income, obviously is a big focus there, but also helping and first identifying community needs. And I think the needs of every community might be a little different. Yeah. So we're very thoughtful in how we look at that in every market that we serve. And then based on those community needs, what can we do to help provide solutions?
Yeah, that's great.
And those solutions really come from, as we call it, the three-prong approach. It comes from being a partner, serving as a partner with nonprofits. I joke, and most people know that I'll say, we don't want to be a sponsor. We want to be a partner. Yeah. We just don't want to be a name on the back of a T-shirt. We want to be someone that's actually having an impact. So we do that through partnerships. We have the foundation, of course, where we have given out millions of dollars.
We're going to have Joe on an upcoming episode.
Okay, that's
runs
great.
Our
okay, so he'll be able to tell you a lot about the foundation, which has been in existence since 2006, and then also through volunteer service. And, that's the thing that I think as an organization we should be most proud of, because our team members definitely pay it forward.
They sure do.
It's not, there's a big difference of saying allow for team members to volunteer during company time. We encourage it and expect it. So very proud of what all of our team members do to serve nonprofits and organizations throughout our footprint.
And you have the term culture in your title as well. And I think that is part of, when you work here, it is part of the culture to invest back in your communities. And it's so neat to see every year all the different stuff that our employees have done. So on the communication side, Kathy, I know you've kind of shaped the communication strategy here at Old National Bank in terms of, internal, external, crisis management, which we'll get into in a little bit later, and PR. So I would love to hear kind of your philosophy on communication, or if you have a preferred style of communication.
So that's a good question. First of all, transparency, and then also kind of the position of what individuals need to know. Sometimes communication can get lost in a lot of noise. So understanding and thinking about what each key stakeholder needs to know in relation to whatever it is you're communicating. Yeah. And so we're really thoughtful in terms of if there's whatever it might be that we need to communicate. So let's say we're announcing a partnership, as we just did with Bremer Bank. how does that communication look for each and every stakeholder? So those stakeholders obviously being, we have our team members. We have the team members from, the other organization. We have our board. We have shareholders. We have the general public. And so what does that communication look like for each one of those stakeholders? And so we really are thoughtful. We lay out a communication plan when we can. It's a little different if you're dealing with a crisis, but we typically lay out a communication plan. We think about the talking points for each one, and then we execute on that. But I will tell you, it's very, very important to be transparent and then also to have the facts. So that's one thing that's key in communication. Never share anything that you don't know is truly a fact. So, because sometimes we get ahead of ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, everybody in this time and day is, on social media, and I always see that. I'm like, just wait for the facts, right? There's so many different stories out there, whether it's political or whatever it may be. But yeah, and sometimes you want to probably jump the gun and, in your head and do something, but it is important to wait for those.
Well, you know me. I'm very anxious.
Yes.
Very anxious, and I'm ready to go. So I have had to learn to kind of slow down.
Yeah.
But I will tell you, I am very thoughtful in terms of communications. Words matter.
Absolutely.
And every words matter.
Yeah.
Every word matters. And so as you're communicating, you need to really be thoughtful in the message that you're providing, and also thinking about the different thinking styles that are going to receive that message. So again, while I'm a very anxious person, as you know, I don't sleep very well because my mind's always working. But a lot of times it's working about, thinking about how to communicate various things to different audiences, and being very thoughtful and sensitive to that.
And I think that's just good in nature for everybody listening. It's like whether you're a student or a kid, holding back and thinking about what we want to thoughtfully say. I try to teach that to my kids as well, because it is hard to do sometimes.
Yeah.
It is. So on a personal style, what's your preferred method of communication if you're just talking to people? Are you a phone talker? Are you a texter, or both?
Oh, no. So I'd rather be in person.
Yeah.
1,000 times over. I think it's really important to see expressions.
Yeah.
I think it's much more personal. You're building a relationship.
Agreed.
I think that's all very, very important, and would definitely be my style.
Yeah, I figured that was the case, but yeah. So you kind of alluded to and touched upon, in crisis management scenarios. And at O&B, we had to deal with a very big crisis with that anniversary coming up, April 10th, which was an extremely dark day in our history at Old National. But for those that may or may not be aware, we had a tragedy here. And while it is a difficult time, we've been able to bounce back and really come together as a company. So I wanted to see, from a communication strategy, that was something that you probably weren't prepared for. We hear about these things, we take trainings, and then something like this happens. And we lost some very good friends and colleagues here at the bank. And I wanted to see if maybe, as we reflect on those losses with April 10th coming up, just from a communication side, sharing kind of what you went through personally and how that evolved.
So to your point, it's absolutely nothing you can prepare for.
Right.
I can't think of a worst case scenario, candidly. Yeah. And I remember the morning very, very vividly. It was the day after Easter. It was a beautiful Monday morning. I don't love Mondays, but it was a beautiful Monday morning. I remember I was in the office earlier. My buddy and colleague, Kendra, stopped by, and we were reflecting on our Easter day and what we did that weekend. And she left my office and then quickly darted back in and had shared, I saw Scott, something's going on at Preston Point. Not sure what it is. We think it's something out on the street. And she said, it's not good. And so that just started a flurry of activity. Others, were coming in for the day. Jim Ryan had, they were in my office. Jim Ryan had called and said, hey, I was headed to, I think it was Bloomington, that he was going to meet a client. He said, I'm turning around. I'm going straight to Louisville. We knew very, very little at that time. I remember continuing to think it was happening in the street. It wasn't impacting our team members, right? And then, so Jim went straight there, and then three of us went like, we're going. We don't know what's going on. We're going. We were kind of like, who's going to go? And we were like, we knew some people had to stay back and take care of the team members here, any activities, logistics, or whatever it might be. So three of us took off. It was the longest and shortest drive of my life. I don't remember much of it, but I felt like it took forever, but I don't remember the drive. Through that drive, we were getting text messages and calls, information, some that was accurate, and reflecting on it, some that was not. I remember receiving something from a family member saying, "Oh my God, I heard something happen at our headquarters." And so there was lots of information flowing out there. I will tell you that we were even close to Louisville and still did not realize the drastic nature of the tragedy. We were, approaching Louisville, and we received a call from a team member that said, very confident that that it's been tragic, that we have some team members that have been impacted, potentially killed, and there was just silence. I think that it was very surreal. To your point about communications, as we're receiving all this information, it did trigger, like, oh my gosh, that's my job, communications. So we have all these, key stakeholders that we're going to have to say something to. And, our primary concern, obviously, were our team members. Again, not at that time, had no clue the fact that we had 5 beloved team members that were impacted. They're like, what are we going to tell our team members? And to my point, what were the facts that we knew? And candidly, we knew very little, other than there was something that was transpiring close or at Preston Point office in Louisville, Kentucky. So, as you know, because you're a part of our amazing team, the team members went back in Evansville, kicked into action, Rick and others. And so we formulated a message to put out to team members as soon as we could. And again, it was only the facts, which was very little, but it's what we knew. And, we're glad we did that. While you want to share more, if you don't have the facts, that's just not a position you want to be in, that you have to retract something, especially when it comes to something so tragic. So when we arrived, it was extremely surreal. Downtown was pretty much closed. Obviously I shared that Jim was on his way there. Jim had arrived before us. We hadn't even called him. We just got out of our cars, and it's like he was walking towards the scene, and we came together. And obviously it was very emotional, knowing that something tragic had happened, still not understanding how very tragic it was that we had lost 5 team members. We went to incident command. Then it became more real.
You see these things on TV in other areas of the country. And for me, while you see the heartbreak, it made it more real of this could actually happen. And we had meetings with this team every month, and just amazing people. And hopefully no company has to go through that. It's very tragic.
No. Is beloved team members that were leaders, friends, family, as we call them. Josh, Dina, Tommy, Julianne, and Jim. We are very intentional about saying their names because it's a promise that we've kept to their family.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for sharing that. I know that was a long time that you guys were there, but it shows the dedication that ONB leadership has, and to the families and just the employees as a whole.
So, Ben, just a couple other thoughts related to that time. You don't know how you'll react, and I have to say a couple things. First of all, I've always known Jim's an absolutely phenomenal leader. I've been with him for almost 20 years. It was a defining moment in terms of his leadership. Yeah. Absolutely incredible. He, of course, as you know, he leads with his heart, and he's caring and compassionate. We were in Louisville every day until the last team member was laid to rest. We would have had it no other way. And then you also think about the people that that surround you. And I feel like God has blessed me in so many ways through my journey, through my career journey. And at that point in time, I can't imagine to have gone through that without the amazing people, personally and professionally, that have surrounded me at that time. We all supported each other.
Yeah.
We led with love. That is one thing. As you know, we were having 1,000 things coming at us. We made the decision, let's lead with our heart. And so every decision we made came from our heart. And so while I'm sure we made lots of mistakes, I will say with a lot of confidence that we led with our heart.
Yeah, I would agree 100% with that. And you could feel the love everywhere that you were. And we'll remember those individuals for a very long time. And they were just amazing people. But thank you for your leadership in that as well. And the entire team, for sure.
Yeah, lots of love, care, and support came from all across even really the country.
So as a time like that, you learn from mentors and things like that. And I know that you're a big fan of mentorship and volunteerism. So I want to see if you could share any experiences, mentoring others. You've had amazing recommendation. I mean, you're the Bank Beat Magazine 2020 Outstanding Woman in Banking, Indiana Bankers Association Woman of the Year, former Big of the Year. You've done a lot of mentoring yourself. And I want to see if you might touch upon what that means to you being a mentor and for a mentee side as well. I'd love to hear your take on that.
So I think it's extremely important, whether formal or informal, to have a mentor and then also pay it forward. So I will tell you that the person that had the biggest impact in my life, professionally speaking, was actually the executive director of the American Red Cross. I was 21 when I started there. I would consider myself a baby then. And so young, impressionable. And she was one of the first female executive directors at that time for the American Red Cross. So she had lots of confidence, but she led with a lot of compassion and passion. And she really pushed me and she coached me. And she helped build my confidence, which I was definitely lacking. And she was just absolutely instrumental in my journey. She would always push me or volunteer me to do things, and which I thought at the time I wasn't capable of. I'm finding out that I was. And so I really credit her candidly to where I am today.
That's awesome.
She's an amazing woman. Actually, I'm having lunch with her tomorrow.
Are you really?
Yes, I am. She's a dear friend.
So on that note, Kathy, we have a lot of volunteerism obviously here at the bank. And for those that may have never had a mentor or been a mentor, I see a lot of people struggle and they have a goal that they want to achieve. How important is finding a mentor? And so I think some people are just nervous to ask somebody, but how important is that?
I think it's really important. And it's not, again, it doesn't have to be formal.
Right.
Find or think about someone that you trust and respect.
Yeah.
And maybe just reach out and just say, maybe we have coffee sometime, or can we talk? Someone you admire. I think the trust, respect, and admire is really important.
Yeah.
And someone that you can have open communication with.
Yeah.
So again, I mean, endless. I mean, I consider my kids as mentors.
Absolutely.
I mean, they teach me all the time.
Yep.
And I think that being a mentor, you'll receive so much back in return.
Yes.
From the mentee.
Yes.
And so I will tell you, like I said, I've been a big in the Big Brother Big Sister program twice. And it was, I promise you, I got so much more from him and her than I probably gave them. And it was such a learning experience. So, and then I would also say that if you're, in a professional career and, you've advanced in your career, make sure you pay it forward.
Yes.
I'm pretty confident most people have had somebody that's guided them or helped them or supported them or coached them through that journey. So make sure you pay it forward.
I like that. So for our listeners, find somebody, have coffee. You might learn a latte, right?
There you go. I knew you had to
you knew there'd be a joke there.
That's right.
For sure. So in the course, I've been here 25 years. You've been here, 20 years. We've seen this bank expand and grow over time. And I think when I started, we were like 8 or 9 billion. And Now we just announced our expansion in the Minnesota market.
Mhm.
So as we have grown, and partnerships, as you mentioned, not acquisition, it is partnerships, has been a big part of the bank's growth. How important is communication and culture alignment
Mm.
when you're looking at a potential partner?
Oh my goodness, it's the most important thing.
Yeah.
And the beautiful thing and the great thing is Jim Ryan believes that obviously very deeply. So we talk about as the partnership of equals. So we had
Yeah.
the partnership with FMB.
Yep. In Chicago.
That's
Yep.
right, in Chicago. And so it was truly a partnership of equals. And so prior to even making the announcement, I remember Jim talking to both Carrie and I, and Carrie, of course, is our people officer, and saying, culture's king. And we got to be laser focused on culture because we've all seen it and heard about where in kind of public terms, people call them acquisitions. Those acquisitions happen, and maybe, a year down the road, they're like, oh my God, maybe we need to start thinking about culture. So before we even made the announcement, he was like, okay, we have to make sure that we bring, two organizations and become a new organization, right? As Jim would say, 1 + 1 = 3. And so, and it can't be Old National way. It can't be just Old National's way. And it can't be, FMB way. It has to be the new way, right? Better together.
Exactly.
That was our mantra. So we actually found a partner to help us with this journey, Hydrock and Struggle, and they've been phenomenal. So the first year we were laser focused on making sure that our executive leadership team kind of were understanding each other, building relationships, going through the process of identifying mission, vision, values. We engaged all of our team members in that process, and really it started our culture shaping journey. And so that journey does not stop.
No.
I mean, you know that. You have to be super intentional in terms of culture. And I think that is something that is so great and beneficial about this organization. We all are laser focused on culture. And when you have that culture of trust and respect and it's authentic, when you have situations such as April 10th or a crisis situation or whatever it may be, goodness sakes, we've been through a lot, COVID.
Yeah.
Then you can get through it a little bit easier because you've built that culture of trust and respect. And so, that's something that we work on each and every day. We just got done with our team member survey, and we take that very seriously. We unpack it. We see where there's opportunities, where there's weaknesses, and we are laser focused on what we can do in terms of those results and hearing and listening to our team members. So that's critically important. It's, as Jim says, it's probably the number one thing that we can do as leaders in our organization is continue to build and work on culture.
That's great. And I love that. Every meeting that I'm involved in, there's always a culture moment. And I love that. And we share those results, as you mentioned. So it's great to talk about. And from a communications standpoint, as you'll notice, we've expanded the way that we communicate to people, right? And we don't have to go deep into this, but we're on. Would you ever have thought that the bank would be on TikTok and and Instagram and Facebook and LinkedIn and all these things? But we have to reach people where they're at. So as you and I prefer being in person, we know that we can't reach everybody that way.
That's right.
So it has evolved and will continue to evolve down the road.
You're still teaching me all of that.
There you go.
The social media.
You'll be an expert
you're super
soon.
active.
So.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that, but I'm willing to learn.
Kathy, I can't thank you enough for sharing your thoughts behind all these different topics. And what we love to do at the end of each episode is kind of close with a lightning round. I'll ask 5 questions and kind of rapid fire answers. So I believe you may have answered one of these already, but what's the most valued lesson that you've learned in your career or life so far?
Wow. Time flies. Every moment is precious. Slow down. That's what I would tell my adult.
Agree.
Yeah, self. And so I think, cherish every one of those moments because you will quickly go from having 3 small children to be a grandma with 3 grandkids is where I am today. So cherish those moments
100%.
because time will fly.
I look at my kids growing up. I'm like, where did time go? And you've told me it's going to go quick. And I'm starting to believe that.
It is. It will fly.
Number 2, if you could instantly master any skill, what would it be?
Oh, gosh. I'd probably say golfing. I'm not very good
Is
at
it not
it.
up to par?
No, it's not up
Okay.
to par. Not up to par. I thoroughly love to golf because I
Yeah.
love to be outside. Super enjoyable to me, but I'm not very good. I always wanted to be able to sing.
Oh,
But
I
I
didn't know
promise you
that.
I cannot. Just join me in my car as I'm
Okay.
listening to the radio, and you will quickly find out I cannot. My dad could, and my sister, but I unfortunately do not have that talent. So that's the other thing. I wish I could sing.
I do too. My sister is a very good singer. All I can do is rap karaoke. So,
You
know.
can. You're
Well,
very good at it. I've heard it.
That might be a future episode. All right. What's your go activity or hobby when you need to relax or unwind?
So again, I like to golf. I like anything that's outside when it's warm.
Yeah,
It
I'm
has to
with
be at
ya.
least 60 degrees. I love the sunshine. You will never find me vacationing north. I will always be south on a beach. I also love to garden, and that's flower gardens. I have multiple flower gardens. It's therapeutic to me.
I did not know that.
And unfortunately, I like to shop. So,
As long as we have a budget for it, we're good.
well, we
right?
really don't, but that's okay. It's therapy as well. So, yeah.
Excellent. And then I think you mentioned this, who's been the most influential person in your life, and that was the executive director of the Red Cross.
Yeah,
so.
Trish DeVoy, amazing lady.
Awesome. And then lastly, what's one piece of advice that you would give to your younger self, Kathy?
Well, I think that's the one where it's kind of slow down. But there is one thing I will tell you. I have some mantras on a few things, and one, Maya Angelou. I love the quote that says, "People will forget what you say, people will forget what you do, but they will not forget how you make them feel." And so that's something I really strive and work towards. I mean, we all have bad days, or maybe don't sleep very well. But I really think the small things can have a big impact, and kindness counts.
I can't agree more with that. And just be nice to people, right?
It's not that hard.
There's a lot of negativity in this world, and I tell my kids that. It's like, you might have a bad day, bullying's tough sometimes. Like, just be a nice person, and it will come back to you.
It really will. And especially nowadays, you do not know what a person's facing, whether it be emotional, mental, whether it be something that's happening in their own, life, their family life. And so sometimes just a smile, a kind gesture, thoughtful words can really have a big impact. And sometimes I think we underestimate the impact that can have. Yeah. So, that's the one thing. When I have an opportunity to talk to, young adults or individuals in school, I think they're a little bit surprised when they say, what's some advice you would give me? And I would like, be kind. Kindness counts. Yep. It's not that hard.
And listen to people too.
And listen to people. Yeah. Be there, be real, be authentic. Yeah. And, then it'll be a better journey.
I agree. Well, Kathy, thank you so much for coming on the Real Life Finance podcast and sharing your story and your journey. I can't thank you enough for being here today.
Well, thank you, Ben. You're a rock star. We all know that.
Well, I learned from the best. So
well, thank you.